The sound of Emily's shoes echoed on the polished floor as she stepped into the CEO's office. She had been here 100 times before, but today felt different. There was something in the air, something that made her feel like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to look into the unknown. Maybe it was because of the big presentation coming up, or maybe it was because of the strange call she had received earlier that day. "Can you come by the office early? I need to talk to you." The voice on the other end had been calm, but the urgency in it was undeniable. Her boss, the Billionaire CEO, Samuel Blackwood, rarely asked for anything personal. Yet, here she was, about to meet him in his private office. It was one of the few places she'd never been allowed to enter. But that had all changed this morning. The office was everything Emily had expected, imposing, sleek, and elegant. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk made of dark mahogany, and leather chairs that screamed luxury. The view of the city below, sprawling and endless, was breathtaking. But what caught Emily's eye wasn't the view or the polished decor. No, it was the wallet on his desk. It sat there innocently, half open. It looked ordinary enough, a black leather wallet, worn from use. It was placed in the center of his desk, as though Samuel had set it down carelessly. She didn't think much of it at first. After all, he was known for being absent-minded about personal things, always focused on the work ahead. But then something caught her attention, something she couldn't ignore. A small, frayed corner of a photo peeked out from between the folds of the wallet. Without thinking, her hand moved toward it, as though drawn by an invisible force. Why was there a photo in his wallet? She had seen Samuel's wallet a few times before, always when he was in a meeting or when he'd casually pulled it out to make a point. He wasn't one to hide things. So why had he left it out, partially open, with a photo sticking out? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that it was meant to be noticed, as if it was some sort of signal. And that photo? That was what had her heart racing in her chest. It wasn't just any photo. It was her mother. Her mother? Emily's breath caught in her throat. The image was faint, but there was no mistaking it. The woman in the picture was smiling, wearing the same warm, kind expression she had seen every day growing up. The woman who had taught her how to survive, how to fight for what she believed in. The woman who had raised her alone after Emily's father had left without a word. The woman who had passed away 2 years ago. Her mother. How could that photo be in Samuel Blackwood's wallet? There was no way her mother had ever met him. Emily's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. Her mother had been an artist, living a quiet, peaceful life. She had never been involved in anything corporate or high profile. Yet, there it was, a picture of her mother, tucked inside the wallet of one of the most powerful men in the country. Her fingers itched to take the photo out, to inspect it more closely. But she couldn't. She couldn't let him catch her snooping around, especially not with such an important person like Samuel Blackwood. As she stood frozen by the desk, trying to make sense of what she had just seen, the door opened. Samuel walked in, his dark suit sharp against his tall frame, his eyes as cold as always. He didn't even glance at the wallet as he made his way to the desk, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he knew exactly what she had seen. "Emily," Samuel said, his voice smooth but commanding. "I'm glad you could make it. We need to go over some details for the presentation tomorrow." His tone was casual, almost too casual, as if he hadn't just left a trail of unanswered questions in the air. But Emily couldn't ignore the tightness in his jaw, the way his eyes lingered on her just a moment too long. It was as though he was waiting for her to say something. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, trying to maintain a professional tone despite the storm swirling inside her. Her mind couldn't focus on the presentation, not when the question gnawed at her. Why had her mother's photo been in his wallet? She glanced down at the wallet again, just for a moment, as he sat behind his desk, but this time, something was different. The photo was no longer sticking out. It was completely hidden. Had he noticed she had seen it? Was he deliberately putting it away? 1,000 questions spun in Emily's head, but she pushed them aside. For now, she needed to do what she was here for, to talk business. But all the while, her gaze kept drifting back to the desk, to the spot where the wallet had been. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some careless mistake. There was something much deeper going on. Samuel was talking about figures, clients, projections, the usual business jargon that filled the air every time they met. But Emily wasn't listening. Her mind kept going back to that wallet, to the photo of her mother. How could it be? Had her mother known Samuel Blackwood? Had she worked for him in some way, even before her death? But no, Emily had seen her mother's life, had watched it from the outside. Her mother had never been involved in anything that could tie her to someone like Samuel. The idea was ridiculous. Emily. Samuel's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. Are you with me? She blinked, caught off guard. Sorry, she muttered, forcing herself to focus. Yes, of course, I'm here. He gave her a long, curious look, but didn't press further. Instead, he continued outlining what he wanted from the presentation. But Emily was no longer hearing him. Her thoughts were consumed with one question. What did Samuel Blackwood know about her mother? And why had he kept her picture in his wallet? The rest of the meeting passed in a blur. Emily's mind wasn't on the business at hand. Every word Samuel spoke, every gesture he made, seemed like part of a bigger mystery she wasn't yet able to understand. She glanced at the clock. It had been almost an hour since she had entered his office. She was getting ready to leave when Samuel suddenly leaned forward, his voice low. There's something else I need to show you, Emily, he said, his expression darkening. Something you need to see. Her stomach flipped. This was no ordinary meeting anymore. Whatever he had to say, it wasn't going to be good. He rose from his chair and walked toward a nearby filing cabinet. Emily's heart raced as he opened it, pulling out a thick folder. He brought it back to his desk and laid it in front of her, a heavy silence settling over them both. This, Samuel said, is why I called you here today. Emily's pulse quickened. Her eyes flicked from the folder to Samuel's face, his expression unreadable. She had no idea what was in that folder, but she could feel that it was something that would change everything. He opened it slowly, pulling out a series of documents and photographs. He laid them out in front of her one by one, as if he was carefully piecing together a story for her to hear. Emily's eyes widened as she looked at the first photograph. It was a picture of her mother again, this time, much younger, standing in front of a building she didn't recognize. Her mother looked different in this photo, more carefree. And standing next to her, a man she didn't recognize either, someone with dark hair, wearing a sharp suit. Her breath caught in her throat. Who is this man? She asked, barely able to form the words. Samuel didn't answer right away. He just stared at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite place. Then he spoke, his voice low and heavy with meaning. You don't know, do you? He said. That man is my father. Emily stared at the photograph in disbelief, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the image of her mother standing next to the stranger. The man in the photo was not just any man. Samuel Blackwood had just revealed a shocking truth: this man was his father. Emily's mind raced, struggling to connect the dots. How could this be? She tried to steady her breath, her chest tightening. Samuel Blackwood's father? How was it possible that her mother had known this man? How could she have kept something like this hidden from Emily her entire life? And why was Samuel showing her this now? The air in the room felt heavy, like the weight of a secret too big to bear. Her mind struggled to make sense of it. Was there something more to her mother's past than she had ever known? And why, of all people, was it Samuel Blackwood, the billionaire CEO, who held these pieces of the puzzle? Samuel noticed her hesitation. His eyes scanning her face for any sign of recognition or understanding. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he spoke again. Your mother, Emily, she wasn't just a simple artist. She had a life before that. A life that involved my father, and it involved me. His words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and Emily's thoughts whirled in confusion. I don't understand, she managed to say, her voice sounding small in the vast, silent room. How could she have known your father? I don't even remember her talking about him. Samuel leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. That's because she didn't want you to know. There are things about her life, things she kept from you. I think it's time you learned the truth, Emily. The truth about who your mother really was. Emily's heart beat faster. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing inward as her thoughts spun out of control. She had always known her mother as the quiet, selfless woman who had dedicated herself to raising Emily on her own. She had never known her mother to be involved with anyone from Samuel's world, let alone a man like his father. Why now? Emily asked, her voice shaky. Why are you telling me all of this? Samuel's gaze softened, just for a moment, as if something inside him had shifted. Because it's time you understood why you're here. Why I've asked you to be part of this company. Your mother's past, it's tied to everything. To me. To you. Emily's confusion deepened. The room felt cold, and her mind raced to piece together what he was saying. What do you mean, tied to everything? How does this involve me? Samuel opened the folder again and slid a few more photographs in front of her. The first one showed her mother, younger and much more carefree, laughing in the arms of the man she now knew was Samuel's father. The next photograph was even more disturbing. It was of her mother, standing in front of an old, crumbling building. A building Emily didn't recognize, but it had the distinct markings of a private estate, a mansion perhaps. The image was taken decades ago, but Emily couldn't ignore the chill it sent down her spine. Your mother was involved in something far more complicated than you realize, Samuel continued. Before she became an artist, she was part of a very secretive network. One that worked with my father and others in my family. They were all involved in something, much bigger than any of us. And you, Emily, are a part of that legacy. You've always been a part of it. Emily's mind was reeling. She had never heard anything about her mother's past like this. Was Samuel lying? Or had her mother really been involved in something secretive, something so big that it had been kept hidden from her? She needed to know more, needed to understand what Samuel was saying. Who was she? Emily asked, almost in a whisper. What did she do before she became the person I knew? Was she really involved with your family all this time? Samuel's expression hardened, the warmth leaving his eyes. Your mother was brilliant, Emily. She was one of the smartest, most strategic minds I've ever met. But she was also one of the most secretive people I've ever known. She had her reasons for hiding things from you, and from me. He paused, as if weighing whether to reveal more. Finally, he spoke again. Your mother and my father were partners, Emily. Partners in a business that involved everything from high-level investments to global power plays. But it wasn't just business. It was a network, a system built on influence, control, and manipulation. And your mother, she was at the heart of it. Emily shook her head in disbelief. No. This doesn't make sense. My mother was never like that. She was kind, gentle. She raised me to be strong, but she never talked about anything like this. Samuel's gaze remained steady, unwavering. She had to protect you, Emily. She didn't want you involved in a world like this. But now, you don't have a choice. It's time for you to understand what you've inherited. You're tied to this, whether you like it or not. The weight of his words hung in the air. Emily's chest tightened, and she had to fight to keep her composure. Inherited, she repeated, her voice rising slightly. What do you mean, inherited? Samuel took a deep breath, and for the first time, a shadow of something like regret crossed his face. I didn't want you to be part of all this, Emily. But your mother's death set everything in motion. The inheritance she left behind, it wasn't just money. It was something much more valuable, something that has kept both our families intertwined for decades. Emily's mind raced. Inheritance? What could her mother have left behind that was so important? She had always assumed her mother had very little when she passed away. There had been no mention of any family fortune, no hidden treasures or secret accounts. What exactly are you talking about? Emily demanded, her voice rising with the frustration she could no longer hold back. Samuel hesitated for a long moment before speaking again, his voice quieter this time, tinged with something almost sorrowful. Your mother was the last living person who knew the location of something very important to my family. A secret. A legacy. And when she died, it passed to you. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Emily's head swam. A secret? A legacy? What was he talking about? You're not just the daughter of an artist, Emily. You're the heir to a legacy that stretches back for generations. And that legacy is tied to power, more power than you could ever imagine. The room seemed to spin around her as Emily's thoughts collided with each other. She couldn't make sense of any of it. Her mother had been a part of something far bigger than Emily could ever have imagined. And now? It seemed, Samuel was pulling her into it, whether she was ready or not. Where is it? Emily asked, her voice shaky but determined. Where is this thing you're talking about? Samuel's gaze never wavered. That's what we need to figure out. Your mother kept its location hidden, and I'm afraid you're the key to finding it. But it's not going to be easy, Emily. There are people who would do anything to get their hands on it. And they won't hesitate to use you to find it. The words echoed in Emily's mind, each one a heavy blow. A secret, a legacy, power, this was more than she had ever signed up for. But one thing was clear, everything she had known about her mother, about her life, was a lie. And now, it seemed, her own life was caught up in something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just Emily anymore. She was part of a legacy that had been kept hidden for years, and now it was time to uncover the truth. But what price would she have to pay to find it? The answer to that question would change everything. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and shock. Emily found it difficult to concentrate on anything, even the simplest tasks. Her mind kept returning to Samuel Blackwood's words, "Your mother was involved in something far bigger than you realize." The weight of it pressed down on her, and no matter how much she tried to escape it, it lingered in her thoughts, eating away at her sanity. She had barely slept since that fateful afternoon when Samuel had shown her the photograph of her mother and his father. The truth that had been revealed was far beyond what she could have imagined. Emily had always seen her mother as a selfless woman, someone who had dedicated her life to raising Emily on her own after her father left. She was the woman who had taught Emily the value of hard work, honesty, and love. But now, Emily didn't know who her mother really was. And the worst part? She didn't know who she was anymore. She stood by her bedroom window, gazing out at the city below. The bright lights of the skyline seemed distant, almost cold, as if they had no connection to the whirlwind of emotions churning inside her. What had she inherited? What was the legacy Samuel spoke of? And why had her mother kept everything so secret? The phone in her hand buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen. It was a message from Samuel. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow. Don't ignore this." The message sent a wave of anxiety through her. She wasn't sure what to expect from him anymore. His calm demeanor had shifted in the past few days. There was something almost desperate in his words now, a sense of urgency that hadn't been there before. Emily didn't want to go, but she had no choice. If she ever wanted answers, she had to face him. The next day, she found herself back in Samuel's office, the same room where their lives had collided just days ago. He was sitting at the same desk, looking more serious than ever. There was no sign of warmth in his eyes now, only the cold precision of a man who had something to gain, and wasn't afraid to use anyone to get it. "Sit," Samuel instructed as she entered. His voice was commanding, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made Emily uneasy. She sat down opposite him, trying to steady her nerves. Her thoughts were still tangled, and she couldn't find a clear path through them. What could he possibly want from her now? "I've done some digging," Samuel began, breaking the silence. "There's more to your mother's past than we thought. I think I know where it is." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Where what is?" she asked, her voice low, barely above a whisper. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, the kind that looked like it contained years of secrets. He slid it across the desk toward her. "Your mother's legacy," he said. "The one she kept hidden from everyone, including me." Emily hesitated but then opened the folder. Inside were more photographs, each one more cryptic than the last. There were pictures of her mother, young, vibrant, and full of life, but they weren't like the ones Emily had seen in old family albums. These photos were taken in foreign countries, in dark corners of the world where the shadows seemed to hold secrets of their own. "This is from when she was in Europe," Samuel said, his voice low and steady. "Before you were born, she was traveling across the continent. She was meeting people, important people. People who were involved in the network I mentioned." Emily's fingers traced the edge of one of the photographs. Her mother was standing on the steps of an ancient stone building, her eyes looking straight into the camera. She looked different, more guarded, more distant. Emily had never seen that look before. "What happened?" Emily asked, her voice breaking through the heavy silence. "Why didn't she tell me about any of this?" Samuel leaned forward, his expression serious. "Because your mother was trying to protect you. She didn't want you to get dragged into this world. But it's clear now that she couldn't protect you forever." Emily swallowed hard. "So, what now? What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Samuel didn't immediately answer. He stared at the pictures, his jaw clenched, as if reliving a part of his own past. Finally, he spoke. "There's something hidden. A document. A ledger of sorts. Your mother was the last person who knew where it was. My father kept it locked away, and when he died, the location went with him. Your mother knew where it was, but she never told anyone." Emily's mind raced. Why didn't she tell anyone? What was so important about this ledger? Samuel's eyes softened for a moment, and Emily could almost see the pain in them. "Because it's more than just a document. It's a key. A key to something far more powerful than you can imagine. It's the foundation of a network of influence, built over generations. Whoever controls it controls everything." Emily's stomach twisted. The stakes were higher than she had thought. Her mother had been part of something much darker, much more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "And what happens if I find it?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Samuel's gaze locked with hers. "You'll have the power to change everything. But there will be people who will do anything to stop you. You won't be the only one searching for it. There are people, dangerous people, who have spent years hunting it down." The words hung in the air, and Emily's mind spun. She had to know more. She had to understand what this was all about. But the path ahead was unclear, and it seemed like every answer led to more questions. "I don't know if I can do this," Emily whispered, her voice shaky. "I'm not like my mother. I don't have the skills or the knowledge." "You have something she didn't," Samuel said quietly. You have the ability to choose. You can walk away. But if you do, you'll be leaving more than just a legacy behind. You'll be walking away from the truth. Emily stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She was torn. Part of her wanted to run, to forget everything Samuel had said and pretend her life was still the same. But deep down, she knew she couldn't turn away. There were too many unanswered questions, too many secrets to uncover. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice resolute. Samuel looked at her for a long moment, and then, finally, he nodded. "We start by going back to the place where it all began. The last place your mother visited. The place where she hid the key." Emily felt a chill run through her. She had no idea what she was about to walk into, but she knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. The cold wind whipped across Emily's face as she stood outside the towering gates of an old, crumbling estate. The place felt like something out of a nightmare, dark, ancient, and full of secrets. She had never imagined she would be standing here, at the very edge of the truth, ready to uncover something that could change her life forever. Samuel stood beside her, his expression unreadable. He hadn't said much since they'd left his office, and the silence between them felt suffocating. The distance between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, too. Emily had come to realize that Samuel wasn't just a billionaire CEO, he was also a man haunted by his past. She could see it in the way his eyes sometimes glazed over when he wasn't looking at her. Whatever this mystery was, it wasn't just about her mother, it was about him, too. "Are you sure this is the place?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The wind had picked up, and the rustling of dead leaves against the ground seemed to echo in the eerie silence around them. Samuel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out key. It was old, the metal tarnished with age, and it seemed out of place in his sleek, expensive hand. He stared at it for a moment, his eyes darkening, before slipping it into his pocket. "This is where your mother hid the key, Emily," he said quietly. "The place where everything began. Your mother knew what was at stake. She knew what would happen if this got into the wrong hands." Emily's heart raced. The place was ancient, covered in ivy and creeping vines. The mansion behind the gates was an imposing structure, half decayed, with shattered windows and a roof that seemed ready to cave in. It looked like something out of a forgotten era. But there was something hauntingly beautiful about it, too, as if the building itself had witnessed centuries of untold stories. Samuel turned toward her, his face set in determination. "We need to find the vault. That's where your mother kept the ledger. The key is the only way in." Emily's mind raced. She had so many questions, so many fears, but one thing kept echoing in her mind: what would they find inside? "This place," Emily began, her voice shaking, "it looks abandoned. Are you sure there's still a way inside?" Samuel nodded, his jaw clenched. "It's been hidden for years. Your mother made sure no one would ever find it. But now, we don't have a choice. We need to get inside." The two of them made their way to the entrance, and as they approached the large, rusted door, Emily could feel the tension mounting in her chest. She glanced at Samuel, trying to read his expression, but he was impossible to read. He was the enigma, and she was just another player in his game, whether she liked it or not. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel's gaze softened for a brief moment. "You don't have to be ready, Emily. You just have to face the truth. And trust me when I say, you don't want to walk away from this." Emily hesitated, but then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward. The door creaked as Samuel pushed it open, and they entered the mansion. The air inside was damp and stale, filled with the scent of old wood and mildew. The halls were lined with cobwebs, and the floorboards groaned beneath their weight as they walked deeper into the house. Samuel led the way, his steps confident and steady. He clearly knew the place, and despite its decay, he moved through the house as if he had been here many times before. Emily followed him, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, that the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. They passed through several rooms, each one more decrepit than the last. Old portraits hung on the walls, their faces blurred with time and neglect. Emily couldn't help but wonder who these people were. Were they part of the network Samuel had mentioned? Or were they simply ghosts of the past, lost in the dust and shadows? Finally, they reached a narrow staircase that spiraled down into the darkness. Samuel paused at the top and turned to Emily. "This is where it gets dangerous," he said, his voice low and serious. "Once we go down, there's no turning back." Emily's stomach flipped. She had come this far, and there was no going back now. "Let's do it," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. With that, they descended into the depths of the mansion. The air grew colder with every step, and Emily could feel a weight settling over her chest. She didn't know what to expect down there, but she knew it was going to be something she could never forget. The staircase ended in a small, dimly lit hallway. At the far end was a large, reinforced steel door, clearly out of place in the otherwise ancient structure. The door looked modern, as if it had been installed just in the last few years. Samuel walked up to it and pulled out the old key from his pocket. He inserted it into the lock, and there was a soft click as the mechanism released. The door swung open, revealing a dark, high-ceilinged room. Emily's heart raced as she stepped inside. The room was massive, filled with shelves and cabinets that lined the walls. There were piles of old books, papers, and dusty artifacts scattered across the floor. But it wasn't the contents of the room that caught her attention, it was the massive safe at the center of the room. "That's it," Samuel said, pointing to the safe. "That's where your mother hid the ledger." Emily approached the safe slowly, her pulse quickening. It looked ordinary at first glance, just a large metal safe with a dial and a keypad. But something about it felt wrong. It felt alive, as if it had been waiting for them, for Emily, to unlock its secrets. "What do we do now?" Emily asked, turning to Samuel. "We open it," he replied simply. "But we need the key." Emily felt a cold chill run down her spine. "The key?" she repeated. "I thought you had it." Samuel nodded, but there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "I do. But the key is not just a physical object. Your mother hid the real key within the network. It's a series of codes, a puzzle that only you can solve." Emily blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about? How can I solve it? I don't even know where to start." Samuel stepped closer to her, his face grim. "You have something she left for you. It's not just the key to the safe, it's the key to understanding everything. And you need to find it before anyone else does." Emily's mind spun. What did he mean by that? What was she supposed to do? Before she could ask any more questions, there was a sound, footsteps echoing down the hallway. Samuel's eyes widened, and he turned to her urgently. "We have company," he said quietly. "And they're not here to help us." Emily's blood ran cold. Who was coming? And what did they want? "Get ready," Samuel whispered. "We don't have much time." As the footsteps grew louder, Emily realized that this was no longer just about finding her mother's hidden legacy. This was about survival. And if she didn't act quickly, everything could be lost. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the cold stone hallway. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt a sudden rush of panic. Samuel was right, this was no longer just about finding the ledger. It was about staying alive long enough to uncover the truth. Samuel's face was taut, his eyes scanning the room for an escape route. Emily glanced around quickly, her pulse racing. The safe was still open, but she couldn't let herself be distracted. They were about to be discovered, and she didn't know who these people were or what they wanted. But one thing was certain, they were dangerous. "Where do we go?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. She could hear the footsteps growing closer, closer to the door of the secret room. The walls seemed to close in on her, and she had a sudden urge to run, to leave, to forget everything. But it was too late for that. There was no turning back now. Samuel didn't answer immediately. He moved quickly to the far wall and pressed his hand against a section of the stone. Emily watched in confusion as a hidden panel slid open, revealing a narrow passage. It was dark inside, the air stale and musty, but it was their only chance. "Get in," Samuel urged, his voice sharp. "Now." Without hesitation, Emily darted into the passage, her breath shallow, the sound of her feet echoing in the confined space. Samuel followed, closing the panel behind them just as the door to the main room creaked open. They stood in the dark corridor, the only sound their breathing, sharp and heavy. Samuel took out a small flashlight and flicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. Emily followed him as he moved deeper into the tunnel, the walls seeming to narrow around them with every step. "Who are they?" Emily whispered, her voice tight with fear. Samuel didn't answer right away. He moved quickly, his steps sure, as if he knew exactly where he was going. After a moment, he spoke, his voice low and strained. "They're part of the network. The ones who have been looking for the ledger for years. They won't stop until they find it." Emily's mind raced. The network, the same network her mother had been involved with. It was all starting to make sense, but the more she uncovered, the more dangerous the situation became. "Why didn't my mother tell me about this?" Emily asked, her voice breaking with emotion. "Why did she hide everything from me?" Samuel paused in front of a door at the end of the passage. His expression was unreadable. "She wanted to protect you. She knew that once you were involved in this world, there would be no going back. The network is powerful, Emily. More powerful than you can imagine. And it's not just about money or influence, it's about control." Emily's head spun. Her mother, the woman she had always seen as her protector, had been hiding something far more sinister. How could she have known? "What do they want with me?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "What do they want with the ledger?" Samuel opened the door in front of them, revealing a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was thick with dust, and the walls were lined with shelves filled with old books and papers. The only light came from the flashlight Samuel held, casting long shadows across the room. "They want to control everything," Samuel said, his voice grave. "The ledger is the key to everything. Your mother knew that, and that's why she kept it hidden. But there are others who will stop at nothing to get their hands on it." Emily's mind raced as she tried to process everything. The network. The ledger. Her mother's secrets. She had thought she was just a regular person, just Emily, a waitress with no idea of the kind of world her mother had been part of. But now, she was caught in the middle of a deadly game. And there was no way out. She turned to Samuel, her eyes searching his face. "What do we do now?" Samuel's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability. "We have to find the ledger before they do. If they get their hands on it, it will be too late for everyone. The world will change." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The world will change. What could be in this ledger that was so powerful, so dangerous, that people would kill for it? She thought back to the photographs of her mother she had seen earlier, the ones that had been taken in foreign countries, in places that looked almost like secret meeting points. Emily's mother had known things. Dangerous things. And now, so did Emily. "We need to find it," Emily said, her voice steady despite the fear that was threatening to overwhelm her. "Where is it?" Samuel's gaze darkened. He walked over to one of the bookshelves and pulled down a large, leather-bound book. It looked ancient, its pages yellowed with age. He flipped through it quickly before stopping on a page near the back. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the key." Emily stepped closer, peering over his shoulder at the page. It was filled with what looked like old symbols, cryptic writing that she couldn't understand. She reached out to touch the page, but as her fingers brushed the worn paper, she felt something strange, a sense of recognition. "What is this?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "This is the language of the network," Samuel explained. "Only a few people know how to read it. Your mother was one of them. She used it to encode the location of the ledger." Emily's head spun. "So, this is the code?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. "This is the key to finding the ledger?" Samuel nodded. "Yes. But it's not just about deciphering the symbols. It's about understanding the history behind them. Your mother knew how to unlock the meaning, but I don't know if either of us will be able to decode it in time." Emily stared at the symbols, feeling the weight of the task in front of her. Time. It was something she had never truly thought about before. But now, every moment felt precious. If the network was on their trail, they couldn't afford to waste a second. "I can do this," Emily said, her voice more confident now. "I have to. We have to find it before they do." Samuel looked at her, his expression hard to read. "It's not just about finding the ledger," he said quietly. "It's about surviving. And once you find it, there will be no going back." Emily took a deep breath. The weight of his words sank in. She wasn't just playing a game anymore. She was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous than she had ever realized. But one thing was clear, she couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from the hallway, a crash. Someone was getting closer. Emily's heart skipped a beat. The network was closing in. "We don't have much time," Samuel said, his voice urgent. "Get ready. We need to move. Now." The two of them rushed to gather their things, but before they could make their next move, the door to the room crashed open, and two men in dark suits stormed in. Their eyes locked on Emily and Samuel, and in that moment, Emily knew, there was no escaping this. She was trapped. But Emily wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't the naive waitress who had stumbled into a mystery she didn't understand. She had a purpose now, and she would fight for the truth. "Move!" Samuel shouted, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back of the room. They ran down a narrow corridor, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind them, the men shouted, their voices angry and full of menace. Emily's heart raced, but she didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. They had come too far to stop now. The hallway stretched ahead of them, dimly lit and eerily quiet. Emily's breath came in short bursts, her body pressed against the cold stone walls as Samuel pulled her along. The sound of footsteps grew louder behind them, heavy and fast. They were closing in. The network was right on their heels. Emily's mind raced. How did it all come to this? Just days ago, she had been a simple waitress in a small diner, completely unaware of the complex web of lies and secrets that had been woven around her life. Now, she was running for her life, trying to unlock a hidden truth that could destroy everything. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore. She was determined to bring the truth to light. "Keep moving," Samuel hissed, his grip tight around her wrist. His face was pale, and his eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and determination. The weight of the moment pressed down on both of them. They reached a dead end in the hallway. A stone wall loomed ahead, but Samuel didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his fingers tracing the cracks in the stone. With a subtle shift of his hand, a hidden door opened, revealing a narrow staircase leading upward. "Up there," Samuel said quickly, his voice low but urgent. "We need to get out of the building." Emily didn't question him. She knew they had no time to waste. They rushed up the stairs, their feet pounding against the worn steps. The sound of pursuit was distant now, but it wouldn't be long before the network figured out where they'd gone. At the top of the stairs, they entered a small room. It was sparsely furnished, with only a few chairs and an old desk. The only light came from a single flickering bulb overhead. Samuel moved quickly to the desk, where a thick folder sat, untouched. "This is it," Samuel said, his voice trembling slightly. "Everything we've been looking for. It's all in here." Emily felt a chill crawl up her spine. The ledger. The thing that had set all of this into motion. She approached the desk cautiously, her hands shaking. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to see it, the answers, the truth, all of it. It was almost like her mother had left this trail for her, knowing she'd one day follow it. Samuel opened the folder and spread the papers across the desk. Emily leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents. She recognized some of the symbols from the old book Samuel had shown her earlier. But this time, there were other papers, documents filled with names, dates, and locations. "This is the ledger?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Samuel nodded. "It's not just a list of names or locations. It's a blueprint, a roadmap for something bigger. It contains the connections, the deals, and the power that this network has built. Your mother knew the stakes. She knew the danger, and that's why she kept it hidden." Emily's heart hammered in her chest. Her mother. Emily had never really understood her mother's constant secrecy. But now, the pieces were beginning to fall into place. "Where's the final location?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel looked at her, his expression serious. "The location of the ledger is encoded in the language of the network. But this," he pointed to one of the documents, "this is the map. It's not just a location. It's a place of power. A place where the network's control over the world could be cemented." Emily felt a shiver run through her. A place of power. She had been running for her life, not knowing what they were truly chasing. But now, she realized how much was at stake. If the network got their hands on this place, it would be a disaster. Suddenly, the door to the room slammed open. Emily spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Two men stepped inside, their faces cold and calculating. Behind them, more footsteps echoed in the hallway. "Too late," one of the men sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You should have left when you had the chance." Samuel reached for the gun hidden at his waist, but the other man was faster, knocking it from his hand and slamming Samuel into the wall. The sound of the impact was sickening. "No!" Emily screamed, rushing forward, but the men grabbed her, pinning her arms behind her. "You don't get to play hero," one of them growled. "You're too far gone, just like your mother. She thought she could hide from us, but now we'll finish what she started." Emily's mind spun. She had to think fast. She had to get out of here, she couldn't let them win. In the chaos of the moment, her eyes fell on the folder. It was still on the desk, its contents laid out for her to see. Without thinking, she grabbed the papers, crumpling them in her hands. The man holding her arm saw what she was doing and pulled her back. "No," he yelled, trying to wrestle the papers away from her. But Emily was quick. She held on tightly, knowing she couldn't let this information slip away. "I won't let you destroy everything," she said through clenched teeth. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the hallway. The door was blown off its hinges, and in the doorway stood a figure, dark and tall. Emily blinked in surprise. It was another man, but he was different from the others. There was something about him, something familiar. He stepped forward, his face shadowed. The men holding Emily froze. "You're late," one of them sneered. "We already have her." The new figure didn't respond. Instead, he raised a gun and aimed it at the two men. The tension in the room was palpable. Emily's heart skipped a beat. "You don't know who you're dealing with," the man in front of her said coldly. "This isn't about you anymore. This is bigger than your petty games." The newcomer didn't flinch. He fired. The sound of the gunshot was deafening, but everything seemed to slow down. The man in front of Emily crumpled to the ground, a red stain spreading across his shirt. His companion reacted quickly, pulling out his own gun, but the newcomer was faster. A second shot rang out, and the man fell without a word. Emily stared in shock. She had never seen someone move so quickly, so decisively. The man didn't even flinch as the chaos unfolded around him. He turned to Emily, his face softening for the first time. "Emily," he said quietly. "I'm sorry it had to be this way." The words hit her like a ton of bricks. She stared at him, confused. Who was this man? He stepped forward and grabbed her by the arm, pulling her toward the door. "We don't have much time. We have to go." "Who are you?" Emily demanded, struggling against him. "I'm someone who can help you," he said, his voice firm. "But we have to move fast. You don't understand the full picture yet. There's more to this than just the ledger. It's about what your mother knew. And what she was trying to protect you from." Emily felt a surge of panic. She wanted to know more, but she couldn't stay here. The room was no longer safe. As the two of them rushed through the halls, Emily's mind raced. She had been thrust into this world of secrets and danger, with no idea who to trust. But one thing was certain, she needed to find out the truth about her mother, the network, and the power hidden in the ledger. They reached a back exit, slipping into the cool night air. Behind them, the building was alive with the sound of shouting and sirens. The network wasn't going to give up that easily. But for now, they had escaped. Emily turned to the man who had saved her life. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice desperate for answers. The man hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice low. "I'm your uncle."